the end of the Second World War, the leading industrial powers more or less agreed amongst themselves to expand public services, and this coordinated investment in public education and health and so forth created a coordinated economic boom between these countries that lasted from the 50s to the 60s. In the 70s, this Rooseveltian consensus, which we sometimes also call Keynesian macroeconomics, appeared to reach its limits, and a series of crises in the 70s paved the way to a transition to a new form of government, advocated, as you know, by Reagan and Thatcher, and giving priority to the market over what had been seen as an over-dependence on the state in the previous 3 decades. This dismantling of public controls over economic activity went along with an increasing tolerance of inequality at all levels in world society, whether within countries or between them. And this reduced concern with inequality went along with the notion that the freeing of markets, as understood by a certain version of economics, would lead the world to irreversible economic growth and prosperity. Now, all of this, I'm sure, is very familiar to you. But what is it that happened, let's say, to anthropology in this period? I mean, my particular focus is on economic anthropology, so I'll talk about that. In the period from the 1870s to the 1940s, anthropologists who studied economy were principally concerned with trying to attract the attention of economists to their ethnographic findings. I mean, the main aim of anthropologists was to show that people like Raymond Firth or Melville Herskovits, coming at the end of that period, the point of that's wonderful. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Okay. I'm finding this not very sympathetic. I mean, this, I don't know, but we'll see if I can rescue this thing. Okay, where was I? Where was I?
Economic anthropology and perspectives.
Okay. So the first task of the anthropologist was to explain that the ethnographic findings were of value to the economists. The economists weren't interested. Okay. So after the 1940s, there was a period in which, from the 50s to the 70s, in which economic anthropologists continued to study exotic and non-Western peoples on the whole. But they argued amongst themselves as to whether the techniques and ideas of economics were appropriate to studying these peoples or not. You know about that. That's the formalist substantivist debate. But until this time, I mean, anthropologists did not study the industrial societies or capitalism in its central activities directly. One of the main features of the last 30 years is that anthropologists have begun in quite significant numbers to discuss and study capitalism in its core workings, both in the Western industrial societies and more generally in the world. I mean, there are not very many of these studies, but they are significant. For example, Kalman Applebaum's book, The Marketing Era, which is a study of the rise and globalization of marketing practices as developed in 18th century England and then 20th century America. Lipuma and Lee produced a book not long ago called Financial Derivatives and the Globalization of Risk, which is which now seems to be certainly well judged in its approach. And so, I mean, there have been, I mean, I wrote a book on money, which had a global context. So several anthropologists in the last, two decades, let's say, have kind of raised their sights to try to address the more inclusive processes of capitalist development in our world. Now these people have on the whole been exceptional. The majority of anthropologists continue to produce ethnographies which are narrow in time and space, in their extent and focus. And so we've really begun, I mean, this is obviously a tendentious description, but I would say that in the last 30 years we have seen, on the one hand, some anthropologists studying capitalism, or if not capitalism directly, post-socialism, or in the third world context, development, and also at the same time a kind of introversion into an ethnography that essentially retains its focus on narrow frameworks of society. But neither of these tendencies, it seems to me, have addressed the question of where the world is going and what to do about it. That is to say that we have lived in a period where the social sciences have become dominated by a certain version of economics to an extent of almost being impoverished and defensive and marginal. And in this country, until the early 80s, the funding for social science research was organized by something called the SSRC, the Social Science Research Council. In 1981, Margaret Thatcher renamed that the Economic and Social Research Council, announced that 80% of all the research funds would be devoted to the study of economic and business practices, and the other 20% would be fought over by the rest of us. And not only did this explicit priority become injected into the organization of social science research, but the notion that economy is separate from society, which of course is key to liberal philosophy and the economics derived from it, was inscribed into the academic division of labor in its most prominent public funding in this country. That the economy is something natural outside society, and the society is something that the rest of us study that somehow has to accommodate the economy. And I believe that for all that some of us have been trying to sort of raise our heads above the parapet and start engaging with larger questions of political economy, it is the case that we have more or less adapted to that vision of the intellectual enterprise. That the big questions of who gets what in this world, of distribution, are questions that we don't engage with. I mean, we may study the workings of capitalism, but it involves studying some stockbrokers in Tokyo. It doesn't involve trying to argue about how the world is becoming more unequal and what to do about it. This is left to economists of a variety of political persuasions, the dominant tendency, but also their critics.